My name's Ben de Pear. I was the editor of Channel 4 News for about 10 years until 2022. I left Channel 4 News when Jon Snow stepped down, just coincidentally. I loved being editor of Channel 4 News. I was very proud of having that position. I think it's the best television news programme. It's a sort of strange hybrid between news and sort of current affairs. There's always an argument within the newsroom as to how long pieces should be, and I'm sure Ria's very aware of that. I set up a production company called Basement Films, and I've just finished my 8th film. I'm making a 9th film at the moment. I've just made 3 films in Gaza on the trot, which is obviously an extraordinary story at the moment, and it's keeping me very busy. But I'm very pleased to be here with Ria, who I have watched. She literally entered the newsroom after I left. I don't think there's no coincidence. Ria was talking to me about joining Channel 4 News when I knew I was leaving. So I was like, oh, that'd be great, yeah. And I just sort of ignored it until the next person. But I did recommend her to the Esme who took over. And I'm glad to see you're at Channel 4 News now. We're going to show some clips. I'm going to allow Ria just to talk, introduce herself, give a bit of her background, and then we're going to play some clips. And if you want to ask questions about those reports, please put your hand up. When you get the mic, please speak right into the mic, get as close as you can, and stand up to ask the questions. Ria is now a correspondent with Channel 4 News. She specialises in social affairs and injustice. She also does some foreign reporting. You'll see some clips here from France and India. And she's received a British Journalism Award, an Asian Media Award, a Criminal Justice Alliance Award, and has been shortlisted for the Orwell Prize. Now, all of those awards are great. The Orwell Prize, to be shortlisted, is a real thing because you're up against journalists from all sorts of media, so writers, and so that's a fantastic achievement to be nominated for that. So, Ria, I said enough. Tell us about yourself. What's your background? How did you get into journalism? What sort of training did you have?
So, thank you for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Yes, I work at Channel 4 News now as a correspondent. My dream job in many ways. I think I've spent my whole career with my eye on Channel 4 News. Obviously, many of the years that I watched, Ben was in charge of the programme. And to me, it represented a news programme that was fearless, did things differently, and set the agenda in their own way, and that was the thing that attracted me to Channel 4 News. But before that, I had been at ITV London News, a very different style of programme. It's a regional news programme, it shares the national agenda, a very small team, fewer resources, but still incredibly ambitious, so I spent a great 10 years there. And before that, I had been at a BBC regional news channel, and before that again, I had started out my career after I left Cardiff Journalism School at Sky News on the news desk. So that's kind of a potted history of my journey, as it were. And then in terms of my background and how that has informed my desire to be in journalism, I think that's quite important for me to talk about, and I want to talk about that. I was born and brought up in a small Welsh coastal town. At that time, there were no black families. I think there were a couple of Southeast Asian families. And I was made to feel aware of my difference. And the reason that is important is because those moments, I suppose, it wasn't relentless, but those moments are kind of seared into my brain. They're really kind of key core memories for me. I'll just give you some examples. You know, even when I was in primary school, I would have to sometimes hide my lunchbox when I opened it, because if Mum had put in delicious Indian snacks, the kids, they were kids, they, be like, oh, yuck, what's that? You know, I was made to feel different. And I think what's important is that there was no curiosity. There wasn't a sort of, oh, what is that? You know, what does that taste like? Why are you having that? And I bring that up because actually I think 30 odd years on, nothing's changed. We don't have that curiosity. We're just divided, you know. We don't want to really put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And that has been really important for me in terms of wanting to pursue journalism. Another thing that I remember, my dad had really difficult experiences at the company that he worked for, and he ended up taking his company to tribunal, and he took me and my sister along with him on many of those days. And I remember clearly sitting there, seeing him stand up in the courtroom and talk about his experiences of racism at work. And I thought, okay, this is what we do. We speak up. You know, this is what our family does. We fight things. We fight injustice. And so I think I've always been interested in other people's lives that are different to mine, and also having an understanding of the fact that there are many marginalised communities. And when I started in news, actually, I realised that a lot of those people in those communities don't get a voice. They don't get coverage. They're barely on the radar. And I wanted to have a go at bringing those voices, you know, into the news narrative.
Out of interest, obviously, schooling was in English. Did you learn Welsh as well? Did you speak Bengali at home? How many languages did you grow up with?
So spoke Bengali at home, spoke Bengali before I spoke English, and then at school, Welsh was compulsory up until I think about the age of 15. It wasn't my favourite, I have to say, but yeah, we learned
Sounds
for a
good,
while.
though.
It does, yeah. So I learned Welsh for a little bit, yeah. Right. I can speak Bengali.
Right. Because, I mean, as someone who's a monolinguist with a bit of French, I mean, there's a huge advantage in having people who do speak languages, and especially as if you're going to be a foreign correspondent one day, which I don't know if you want to be, but being able to go to India and hear what people are saying around you, rather than being from a English background and going there and having a translator who you have to rely on, and it's a big advantage, I think. It was always an advantage in our newsroom. Yeah. But I just find it interesting if you were also speaking Welsh as well.
Yeah, no, it is a massive advantage. I went to Valencia last week to cover the floods. I don't speak Spanish, but you do find yourself in situations where it's just that it just creates a little barrier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you can't directly communicate with somebody and there's a translator there.
Answer immediately, you have to wait for
exactly.
the person's thinking about something else, especially if they're in a distressed situation.
Yeah, it just takes away a little bit of that connection, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about your background or
No, I don't think so.
Okay, fair enough. Should we have a look at the first clip? This is from Marseille. I've actually got a couple of questions, having watched it again, I'll ask you, and we'll take questions from the audience as well.
Yes.
So do you want to just tell us a little bit about
this? Intro it, yes. Yeah. So this is the story of two gangs in Marseille, the DZ Mafia gang and the Yoda gang. And they essentially control the city's northern quarters. And the northern quarters are a bunch of low-income estates. And last year in Marseille, 49 people were killed in gang violence. 62% of the killers were under the age of 21 years old. And the proportion of people living below the poverty line in these northern quarters is roughly 51%. So we wanted to capture the story of one block. The block is run by a gang, and there are lots of different roles. So you have something called the chouf, which is the lookout. It's often a 13, 14-year-old boy who sits outside the block and does like a 12-hour shift, just looking out for the police. Then you have le gérant, which I think is manager. So this is the 20-odd-year-old who manages all of the different members of the gang. And then you have the dealers, who sit on the third or fourth floor of the block in, like, these are some of the grimiest, most decrepit blocks that I've ever seen. They sit there in the dark all day long and they're selling drugs. And it was fascinating to see over about a 6 or 7 hour period, the number of people that were coming to buy drugs, but people from all walks of life. So yeah.
The majority of residents are first and second generation migrants from North Africa. The sheer neglect and decay is aggravated by dealers, that rule the blocks. What about the people who live in the building? Do you have a good relationship with them? Do they feel okay coming through here?
Certes, ça les dérange de crier et tout, mais sinon, à part ça, ils sont très très bien. Ils ont besoin, ils nous demandent. Du coup, il n'y a pas de problème, il n'y a pas d'histoire de voisinage, on est tous ensemble, on est comme une grosse famille.
Luxury apartments have doormen. These towers have dealers. Alexandre manages them. Teenage bravado dominates a space that is meant to be home for these other children walking by. There's chaos in squalor, and it shows on this estate. But the dealers run a very tightly organised economy. We're waiting for Alexandre to get the go-ahead to show us around, from his boss, who's in a prison cell.
J'attends qu'il me donne la confirmation. Ouais, il m'a dit, ouais, montre-lui tout.
It's taken roughly an hour, but we're in. We've changed the names of everyone we speak to. Where are you taking us?
Alors là, je vous emmène où le vendeur vend. C'est bon, madame, impeccable? Allez, passez une agréable journée. Là, je vais pas filmer, vous inquiétez pas. C'est bon?
The flow of dealers, residents and customers is relentless.
Alors là, je vous explique, c'est le menu.
Menu, yeah?
10, 30, 50 de shit, 10, 30, 50 de masse, 250 €, 5 grammes de mâche, et on vend les plaques à 250 €.
Alexandre flexes his power like this regularly.
Bonjour, messieurs.
Bonjour, tiens,
Enchanté.
allez, tiens, descends le sang, allez, rapide, speed, le sang, speed. Allez, merci, thank you.
What's in here?
Alors, ici, c'est la marchandise du vendeur.
He's keen to show off. In the camera, he sees an opportunity to outdo the other gang. After all, this is a duel for turf, cash and notoriety.
Genre, même s'il faut monter 10 étages, je vais montrer 10 étages pour prendre leur consommation.
How do you think the people who live here feel about the fact that this happens here?
Dieu, ils calculent même plus, ils sont habitués. Ils sont grandis comme ça, je pense. Après, je viens pas d'ici, donc je peux pas savoir.
The sellers do 14-hour shifts, either alone or with a runner who's in charge of grabbing the drugs and bolting if the police arrive. They're paid between 150 and 300 euros. Money is the Pied Piper.
Et voilà, c'est ça qui me rend tout mon royaume. C'est les flous, c'est les sous.
He's not from Marseille. In fact, teenagers are regularly recruited on sophisticated Telegram channels that offer accommodation, food and transport. Suddenly, we're told in no uncertain terms that we're interrupting business.
Time is money. 1 minute.
1 minute? Okay.
On the way back out, we bump into a mum with her children. She's been the only resident willing to talk to us.
It's very difficult.
And you're laughing about it, but it must be hard.
What will I do? For me, they don't harass me, so I don't have problem with them. After school, we stay inside.
You're trying to protect him?
Yes. It's my right to protect them.
I mean, round of applause, I think. I've got a few questions, actually. Firstly, how did you get the access? I mean, that's a lot of TV journalism about this and documentary making, news, less so, but it's always about access. That is an extraordinary situation to get access to. So how did you get the access?
It took a long time, Ben. It took ages, actually. The idea for this story came from another piece that you're going to see in a bit. I'd done a piece about a young boy in London who'd been stabbed, and he'd suffered life-changing injuries. When that piece went out, I noticed that online it went viral, and the people that made it go viral were French teenagers, and they were quote tweeting the piece with just absolute horror and panic. And I was thinking, what's going on? And so that's what led me to this story. And I knew that I couldn't just go to the foreign desk and pitch a sort of, I want to go to Marseille and, you know, we can speak to a youth worker and we can speak to a family. I knew it had to be something different. And I just had this idea of getting access to a gang, but also telling the story of one block. Obviously, that's setting the bar quite high, but me and the producer, a French guy called Flavian, who's a journalist, and also the person who filmed this, he's a camera operator too, we were just relentless on it. And it's like speaking to one person, maybe a journalist from a French channel, who then gives you a contact number for a producer, who then gives you a contact number for a fixer. And then eventually we came across a young guy called Riam, who he'd come from quite a notorious family and has made his way out of this life, and essentially was like, look, I can get you access, but it's your one chance. Once I burn this opportunity, because it was an opportunity for him as well, as in he wanted to get into film and TV, and so he didn't want to just give this kind of pass out. So it felt quite high stakes. And even up until the last minute, so we flew out there on like a Thursday or Friday, the access hadn't been secured. We just knew we had to go and spend time with this young guy so that we could build up a bit of rapport, some trust. He could meet us, because it had all been done over the phone. So it was quite touch and go, but it was fine in the end.
I've got two questions. To tell you a similar story, not as dramatic as this, but I got access to a gang in the Cape Flats. I was based in South Africa for a while, and we had a number of meetings. We had a guy who was a former gang member who had become a sort of journalist fixer, and he got us in the room with the guy who was in charge of the area. I can't remember what it's called, Mannenberg, and there'd been a big shootout with the police. And when he asked us, there were three of us, South African, me and Stuart Ramsey, who's actually from Porthcawl, like you.
Yes.
And when they asked us where we were from, I said I was from London. And Stuart Ramsey said, you always say you're from London. You're not from London, you're from Staines. And at the time, they weren't giving us access. And the gang leader said, are you from Staines? And I was like, yeah. And he said, do you know Ali G? And I went, yeah, I do. And he went, boy, Akasha. And we got access to fly for a week for the whole thing, because he thought Ali G was a real person and that I could facilitate a meeting. So access comes in many different forms, and that was just a random thing. My first question is, why did you, so there is an Ofcom regulation that people cannot hide their faces or be anonymised unless there is a reason to protect them. In this case, these are criminals who are hiding there. And how did you get past the lawyers with that?
Well, first of all, to be quite frank about it, it was the only way that they were going to speak to us. So that was the first thing. The agreement was that we could film with them, but the people that we would speak to would have to be anonymised, and the lawyers were okay with that.
Right.
And another thing that I wanted to say about this,
because this is interesting for Ofcom. Ofcom regulates television news in this country, and that would be the public interest of showing this, of being inside this group, would outweigh the requirement to show people's faces who are criminals.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. This was a really tricky piece to do in the edit, and it was a tricky piece to script because, these issues are quite polarising. People have quite strong reactions to them. And ahead of time, me, Flavian and Freddie, who was the producer, who's excellent, we'd put a lot of time into thinking about how we were going to present this story and tell this story in a way that didn't take away from the gravity of what they're doing and the criminality and the impact that it has on the residents and the children and the young people who live in that block. And also the responsibility and the awareness that a lot of reporting and storytelling on these issues demonises young people and does not take into account a lot of the underlying issues that feed into, a 13-year-old boy who's willing to travel from another part of France to go and sit on a cold step outside a grim block for 13 hours. I mean, what are those reasons? We wanted to make sure that we could put together a nuanced piece which addressed all of those different things that I've just mentioned. And that can be hard sometimes,
Yeah, I've got one very quick question. What happened afterwards? Did the police raid this place? Could they?
So just after this, literally the next scene, we hear from downstairs. So they have a call. The boys, the young men who are part of this gang, they have a call that comes from the shoof, the lookout, when he sees police. That's his whole job. I'm not going to do the noise now. But we heard that call, so we had to pelt it downstairs. Everybody ran, everybody scarpered. So we just ran downstairs, and he'd seen what he thought was a plain-clothed police officer somewhere nearby. And then we hung around for ages, and I'll just finish off this section with what happened towards the end of the night. We were waiting. The manager had disappeared, and he was meant to do an interview with us, and that was going to be our accountability interview. So we waited for him for ages. It got to like 9 o'clock. It was getting dark, and we were just sat outside on the wall. And then we saw this mum come with her 6-year-old son. She was just thin, gaunt, came to the block, and she paused and she looked at her son, and then she looked over to us, and she came over to us and she said, will you look after my son, please, when I go inside? So this little kid was there. We asked him what his name is. He said, my name's Amir. He had his little trike with him, and he was full of energy, and he was like showing us his trike. So he did that a couple of times, and then all of a sudden, Ben, he just switched. And he started crying, and he was saying, please, please get my mum out from that building. Please get my mum out. He said something like, she's going to fade away. I need her to come out. He's 6 years old. Yeah. And so, it was heartbreaking. We had to come give him some comfort. And then she came out, and he was relieved, and suddenly he was happy again, and they just walked off. And that was hard to process. Like, I couldn't shake it. We got back to the hotel that night really late, and I ended up having to. I wrote about it. I wrote him a letter because I thought it was the only way that I can get out of me what we'd seen. Because it was heartbreaking.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions about this? Sorry, in the front row. Third row. It's on, I think.
It's on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously in that footage, it seems like you're in quite a dangerous and quite confined situation, but you seem like really calm and measured throughout the whole thing. So how do you manage to be like that? Is it just something that comes naturally, or have you had to kind of learn it over time?
Thanks for that question. It's a really good question. I think it's a mixture of both of those things that you just said. I think over time, having been in those environments time and again, you sort of, I guess, your humanity grows. You come to understand people, and whereas a viewer might watch and be like, oh my God, that person's a threat. Actually, if you're kind of spending time with people and making connections with them, then that kind of diffuses that. And it was quite chaotic. So the three of us, me, Freddie and Flavian, were having to manage a very unpredictable situation, and that does cause anxiety, So we were a great team, and we'd had lots of discussions beforehand, plans of what we were going to do if things went wrong, and we all trusted each other. There's a lot of trust between the three of us, and that helps a lot. So, we were there for each other, if that makes sense. And I think that also just makes you feel calmer, makes you feel more comfortable, and you're like, okay, we've got this together.
If there's no other questions, but I'm going to take one. Sorry, there, in the blue shirt.
Yeah, this is kind of hard to summarize because I have quite a few questions, actually.
Try and keep it to one.
Okay. So with that little boy, and I guess other situations that you might have been in, where sometimes you might want to intervene and help, what is the kind of, what can you do in that area? I mean, because you can't help everyone, but...
Right, you said it yourself. Thank you. That's a good question too. It's hard. It's really, really hard. I was in Valencia. What day are we on now? I can't remember. A few days ago, I was in Valencia covering the floods. And I was texting my partner, just being like, this doesn't feel, I feel bad, you know, because we're here and we're filming. And we're in this little town that has just been completely devastated, and people are like mucking out the water and they're getting out all of their belongings. And I think it's a natural reaction to feel like I want to help. And also, I think a lot of people there felt like we were helping just by speaking to them. I think that's the thing that you have to hold on to sometimes, is that people are saying to you, thank you for, you know, allowing our story to be heard, because we need the world to hear this. It's difficult to manage, though.
I think we need to move on because we've got 3 more clips.
Sure.
So, tell us about this next clip, which is James's story.
James's story, yeah. So this is the story that I was telling you about that sparked my interest in what was happening in France. James Basco-Smith is a teenage boy who was stabbed in 2021. He'd gone out to try a new bike that his mum had given him, and it was a mistaken identity. He was stabbed. He had to FaceTime his mum from the street. And he survived, thankfully, but he's got life-changing injuries. And I've done a lot of work on youth violence in London. So when that happened, one of my contacts called and said, the family want to speak to you. So the first that I met them was on the helipad of Guy's in St. Thomas's, I think. James was still in hospital. They didn't know what was going to happen to him, but they wanted to speak up. They wanted to say, look, like, there's a crisis. There's a crisis in London, a knife crime crisis. And so that's how I was first connected with the family. And then we spent about a year, because there was a trial in between, talking about doing this piece, where we spent a couple of days with James trying to understand just how much his life has changed as a result of this stabbing that happened.
The house wakes to the clicks and clacks of long-term care.
Nurse Lisa. Yeah, this is where it's like a massive responsibility, because it's get your dosage and everything right. Morning.
There's no time to ease into the day.
Gonna do meds, okay?
James Basco-Smith is one of a handful of people in London who has survived a deadly pattern of knife injury.
It's just cold.
On Tuesday, the 23rd of February last year, James left his mum on the doorstep for a few minutes. He was test riding a new bike. In that time, he was run over, then stabbed repeatedly. An innocent victim caught between 2 rival gangs. Suddenly, a young boy into gymnastics and his DJ decks was having his chest opened by medics on the street. His 2 attackers have been sentenced to life in prison. The judge said Taquain Lewis and Leon Rashid had been searching for a target to murder. The attack triggered by a drill music video and online provocation between the gangs. James was in court today, but he gave his impact statement through a video message. I did not deserve this, he told the court. I just want to know why they did this to me. His attackers watched from the dock.
There's somebody outside that door with him 24/7.
I first met the family on the helipad of King's College Hospital, exactly 1 week after the stabbing.
I had a FaceTime from him with him on the floor, like telling me, Mum, I've been stabbed.
Yes, we have got justice. It still doesn't change the position James is in. It doesn't change the lifestyle that we're now having to live.
This is James's journey and the story of his family and friends. They too are the victims of violence.
James, what do you think about when you think of the future?
Yeah. I mean, it's very upsetting watching that. how did you get the access there? You explained some of it in the reporting, but that's such a hard thing to get access to. Obviously, with a criminal gang, it's a different thing, but that's a traumatized family. And how did you handle yourself when you were speaking to that family to get the access?
It's really about building relationships with people, Ben, and building trust. I'd first spoken to the family, you saw in that clip, on the helipad. And I stayed in touch with them, not necessarily because I wanted a story, but you get touched by people's lives. And Rachel, who you didn't see in the clip, Rachel is James's aunt. She and I just kept in touch. We talked. It was hard for me and us as a team. And I first met them when I was at ITV London to see what they were going through. And so, it was just checking in with them. How's James doing? What's happening with the family? The mum was having to be moved into a different house, so there was all of these problems happening with the housing system. And so it was keeping in touch with them. And then from those conversations, there emerged this idea, well, people need to see what James is going through and how he's living now as a result of this. And it took a long time, as I said, because there was a trial in between and they wanted to make sure that James would be absolutely comfortable with that, rather than just ask him on one day and he says yes. They wanted for there to be a prolonged period of time for him to properly think about it. Building relationships has really served me well, I guess. It sounds cold saying served me well, but it's just a really crucial thing.
And of course, you must have had a very understanding editor to give you the time to work on that, and just to how often? What was that sort of like? Was it? How often were you talking to the editor about it? Was the editor saying we need this story? Because it's one of those weird stories that comes out with an exclusive tag on it.
Right.
Just about that as well. It just feels strange when you see that. I understand it. Personally, I may not have put it on, but I understand that there is a competition for this, but it also gives a value to the story as well. But just how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you touched upon that, Ben, because I struggle a lot with that exclusive tag for whatever it is. I get it. I understand, as you said, it gives value to the story, and if it's an exclusive, it might draw people's attention to that story. It'll drive traffic towards it, I guess. People will understand that they're only going to see that story in that one place. But, I do a lot of social affairs and home affairs work, and I work with people who have been traumatized by really horrific things. And just as an example, when the story of the Metropolitan Police officer, David Carrick, who was a serial rapist, came out, I worked really hard to get an interview with his first victim, and that was an exclusive. And I said, no, we're not going to label that as an exclusive. It's just wrong. It doesn't feel right. I reckon there are probably a couple of ways that you can get an exclusive. One of them is to just be dogged about it and be quite brazen and say, we want this to be an exclusive. The other way is, it harks back to the thing that I was talking about, building trust. If you build trust with people and your contacts, they will just say, I only want to do this story with you. You don't have to go there and say, oh, can I have an exclusive? They just, that's what they want.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out to you guys and see if you've got a question. I saw your hand go up first on the left. The glasses, sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
How has covering stories on youth violence and gangs impact you personally, especially in terms of mental health?
Thank you. It's been hard. It impacted me quite a lot, actually. So I spent about 5 or 6 years when I was at ITV London doing it relentlessly. So that looked like every single day almost, meeting a grieving family, going to a funeral, going to a scene where there'd just been a stabbing, and you can feel it in the air. It's very kind of, you can't help but absorb it. And so ITN, that's our company, is great. It has a counselling service. So I've had counselling, I've had therapy for that. Talking to my network, my support network has always helped me. And I had to learn quite quickly to switch off, you know. I remember one weekend, I was living, where I was living, I walked out of my front door and the street was cordoned off because there'd been a stabbing. And I just immediately went back inside, shut the door, and I didn't leave for the whole weekend. And that was the weekend I think I knew, okay, you need to speak to somebody because I felt really, I didn't feel good, you know? So I think there are resources available to us to support us, to sustain us, to help with our mental health. I know it's still kind of a difficult thing for people to talk about, but all of the things that I've mentioned, I leaned on those things and I learned strategies and ways to make sure that I feel okay.
And there is, of course, the reward of doing something you think is good as well. There is that, isn't there, that you can always lean back on. I mean, There is the shock of seeing stuff like that and sharing people's trauma. But there's a reward from doing this sort of work that helps with that trauma as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Take one more question. Sorry. In the red jumper, I'm sorry, I saw you first.
Thank you so much for doing this. You don't understand how impactful this is for all of us to be able to watch this. My question is, it's not necessarily related, but even with seeing The Resident from the clip that you were showing with the gangs, I was just wondering, how do you feel? Do you feel like, as you are a contracted journalist, do you feel like that you can, how am I going to word this? That you can almost like protect your sources better, or not even your sources, but how do you feel like, how can you almost protect yourself, not protect yourself, but protect anyone that would be filmed, even if they are anonymized, etc.? Like, how do you feel like that there is like certainty that they are protected? Because many of us in the room may, do interviews with individuals that want that protection, want that certainty, and want that trust to feel protected. So how would that potentially work out, if that makes sense?
Yeah, how do you protect your sources? I mean, it's almost like the golden rule, isn't it, Ben? When you're doing really sensitive stories or you've guaranteed anonymity to somebody, you have to. And that is just the only way. I mean, how do you ensure that person stays anonymous? If it's an anonymous interview that you've agreed, what we tend to do as teams on the ground, we will frame up a shot, and then before we even start the interview, we'll show them the shot. We'll show them a little clip. Are you happy with this? Are you happy with the way that this looks? So then you're constantly reassuring the interviewee. And then, if I'm in an edit suite and I've done a sensitive story where there's anonymity, I'm that person that's like going through literally every single shot, and I'll do it 4 times in a row just to make sure. And then we have whole teams of managers who come in also, and they'll watch pieces. So it's not just one person who's across the piece. There are lots of people who are involved, including our lawyers, to ensure that a source is protected.
Yeah, and I would, in my job as editor, I would have to come in and watch everyone's pieces. Normally, if it was a piece like that, I would have watched it a couple of times before it went out. But on the night you go in, sometimes you just say, freeze that frame, and then you say, enlarge that bit there. Sometimes there's an envelope on the desk, someone's name on it, and it's just that thing. It's always the small thing that you overlook that will completely get you. I was going to use a different word, but I won't use it on stage. I think we should go on to the next one.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
We have equal time. And this clip is from India, where you were covering the BJP elections. Well, the elections which the BJP won, I suppose.
Yes. I think there are 2 clips here. One is from the elections this year, so I went out to cover them. And another clip is from when I was working at ITV News. They have a current affairs programme called On Assignment. I had pitched a story about the issue of dowry abuse that impacts women in India. There'd been a lot of suicides connected to that issue. So I'd gone out to report on that, and they also then said, look, there's this issue of the rise of Hindu nationalism, so let's also do a piece on that. So I think those are what these two clips are.
Many of the BJP's policies since 2014 have been accused of targeting Muslims, legitimising discrimination against the community, and encouraging violence. Data shows that from 2019 to 2020, religious rioting went up by 96%. We put these figures to Jai Panda, the vice president of the BJP.
I don't know where you come up with these statistics.
From the National Crime Bureau records.
Okay, maybe a small group clashing is counted as a communal riot, but in terms of the actual number of violence or people affected by violence, deaths, hospitalizations, arrests, India is certainly far better off. You used to have very large riots, large-scale riots, where thousands of people used to get killed. There haven't been any such example in the time that the BJP has been in government. So if you add up...
well, there's the Delhi riots in 2020.
Yes, indeed. But you haven't had thousands of people killed in riots.
Does it matter if it's thousands of people or 53 people as were killed in the 2020?
I think it matters. Unless you are trying to build a narrative that the BJP is some kind of an ogre. What the BJP stands for is for law and order.
At this polling station in the city of Indore in Madhya Pradesh, a BJP stronghold, voters are completely disillusioned with the opposition. If any of these people wanted to vote for the opposition Congress candidate, hard luck. He joined the BJP this week.
There is no opposition. What can we do? So even if they stand, it's pointless.
I have read newspaper reports that claim he was forced to join the BJP.
We first meet Bansuri Swaraj, a BJP candidate, amidst the mayhem of her rally. The opposition are feeling quite miserable. They're saying that the BJP is misusing government agencies to hold on to power. Is it?
First, they're the opposition. It is their job to feel a little bit miserable because they...
Hi, good to see you. Next time, she answers our questions with her mother watching over, once Foreign Minister to Prime Minister Modi. Swaraj Jr. insists the electoral agencies are autonomous.
You say that the BJP welcomes dissent,
of course,
from opposition parties.
Of course.
What does that look like to the party?
In fact, if you actually see, all your questions are stemming from that dissent. Even the opposition, the fact that they have forged an alliance is stemming out of that dissent. The dissent seems to be extremely selfish, self-driven, self-serving, but then so be it. I'm again telling you, democracy in the country is alive and thriving.
Well, that's decided then, according to the BJP. There are 20 days till the world's largest democracy announces its election results. But many say the process has been tainted by a party hell-bent on holding on to power.
I'll ask just two quick questions. How far apart were those reports?
2 years.
And what did you notice? Because I know that there's been a huge crackdown on press freedom in India. Did you notice that yourself? Because you seemed to get good access on the second time, but did you notice?
I mean, we really did notice it. So the second clip where you see me on top of a bus with the Delhi BJP MP, we did a little walking interview with her. And I challenged her a number of times. She got very annoyed and she sort of abruptly cut the interview and left. Within about 10 minutes of that interview finishing, our local producer had a phone call from the BJP press office, he basically said something like, don't use that interview. If you don't agree to do the interview again, then we're going to create a lot of trouble for you. So it was so uncomfortable and it was infuriating. And we had to have lots of conversations then with our foreign editor about how we were going to handle this, because as you say, Ben, that year, lots of foreign journalists had been chucked out of the country. And so we were now having to navigate this whole idea of, okay, do we do a classic Channel 4 News accountability interview? Or do we risk getting chucked out of the country and then we can't? It was the first day, and then risk the whole 2-week trip. You know, it was really uncomfortable. And in the end, what we decided to do, because we thought it was a compromise, that we were going to use some of the original interview and we would do another interview. And that was the way that we got around it. That's not what I wanted to do, and that's not what a lot of other people wanted to do.
I think it worked, to be honest.
Yeah.
And obviously, you talk about foreign journalists being chucked out, but the Indian journalists who can't leave their own country are under extraordinary pressure. I'll take questions from the audience again. So I saw your hand first there.
Hey, I'm kind of curious to know, from a seed of an idea, how long you could get for research and development until you speak with a contributor, and how often you might use like emerging technologies or AI to kind of find ideas.
That's a great question. I find, so I'll answer the second part first. Ideas, they kind of just come up any time. You know, I could be walking or on the bus or on the tube, or, you know, as I explained before with the Marseille piece, you know, you notice something interesting that's happened and you think, okay, and I just tend to write them down and then start doing research. So I've never used AI or anything to come up with an idea, although that's a very interesting thought, and I wonder if people do that. And then in terms of a timeline, it honestly varies. So some pieces you can have an idea and practically it can be filmed, researched, you can get your data if you need some in like a week and a half, and you can organise your crews in the newsroom, speak to producers, speak to the head of the home news desk, and do all of that organising quite quickly. And obviously in news, we're all very used to being reactive, so we're quite good at mobilising and getting ready to film something. And then with other stuff, like with Marseille, you know, that took 6 to 8 months of researching, trying to get the access, digging into figures, contacting the government, the police there. So that took ages. And then also with India, we planned 3 films before we went. So we knew what the topics were that we wanted. And obviously we were here. So that organising, that planning, setting up interviews, setting up filming took longer just because of the time difference and not being there. So it really varies. Yeah, we can be super quick or it can take ages. It depends on the story.
My slight scepticism about AI was I don't understand it, firstly. But secondly, I do know that lots of people in my new world, which is documentaries, use ChatGPT. Is it ChatGPT to write pitches? And I get sent them, and I see other colleagues sending them, and they are extraordinarily good. But I don't think you should be doing that for your essays, obviously, and everything else. But it's a world I need to enter into. But sorry, one more question at the front. Sorry, saw you first.
So you talked a little bit about getting access to some of these stories, especially going out to India. Would you be able to touch more on if you had any struggles, first of all, getting into the country with all your camera equipment, things like that, and then second of all, with actually publishing the stories afterwards and how you may have faced those issues?
So no issues getting into the country with camera equipment and things, thankfully. It was all fairly straightforward. After the incident that we had on the first night with the BJP, everything just felt trickier. We had to, because that was the first interview. We knew that we were doing maybe 2 more interviews with BJP candidates and BJP representatives. So we had to put a lot of exhausting thought into how we were going to do those interviews. Channel 4 News has got a reputation for accountability. If you're lucky enough to sit in front of somebody who has a lot of power as a government representative, it's a commissioner of a police force, then you have a responsibility to ask them difficult questions. You have a responsibility to ask questions on behalf of the people that are watching. And there's a way that we do that, and we have that instinct. And in a way, we had to suppress that instinct a bit. And maybe not suppress it, but we had to sort of do mental somersaults about the questions that we were going to ask. And, I wasn't allowed to interrupt, which is something that you kind of have to do. If somebody's like telling you a lie mid-sentence, you have to interrupt them. And so there was a lot of thought then that had to go into that after their intervention on that first day, and that was very frustrating.
I think we'll play the last clip. I'm sorry, we need to move on because we're running out of time and I've been told to keep exactly to time. So please play the next clip.
Is the Police Federation of England and Wales cracking at the seams? The long-time allegations of bitter infighting, divisions and financial chaos are escalating. The Federation represents 145,000 rank-and-file police officers, and it's a notoriously closed-shop organisation. But for the first time, people who were once inside its inner circle are speaking out.
It's a culture that you can't speak out. If you speak out, you are silenced. That's exactly what happened to me.
Channel 4 News has spoken to several staff members across the Federation, both current and former, both on and off camera. They say the Staff Association is self-serving, fundamentally failing, and perpetuates a culture of fear.
He likes to call them internal terrorists. Anybody that causes any element of friction or unsettlement in the organisation, is deemed to be going against him.
The chief executive officer, that is, the man some allege who's at the heart of the most recent problems. The organisation's financial difficulties means balancing the books has never been more crucial, and some believe that spending is out of control. The bracing breeze along Colwyn Bay helps to clear Sergeant Mark Jones's mind, which is often flooded with thoughts of his time as the Secretary of the North Wales Police Federation branch.
The scars and the emotions are raw, and I feel like I've let my colleagues down, I've let my family down, when I've done nothing wrong.
In his role as chair of the Finance Committee, Mark was tasked with scrutinising the organisation's spending. But he claims the second he started asking difficult questions, his career went into freefall.
When it came to the national budgets in the headquarters in Leatherhead, it was essentially, you don't need to know, or we'll just give you the headline figure, that's all you need to know. And that felt really uncomfortable to me because we were talking significant amounts of money, millions and millions of pounds being spent, and we were not able to do our due diligence and look into that.
Mark says local branch spending was scrutinised to the penny, but he says he saw spending by head office that seemed excessive to him.
So, I mean, I should have preceded that by saying now for something completely different. This is the sort of bread and butter of UK news journalism, TV news journalism, which is about institutions. And the Police Federation, it's not as exciting as being in India. It's not as emotional as being with a family, with that poor James, is it? Sorry. James, who was stabbed. But these are just as important. The Police Federation is like a very closed-off organisation. It has a lot of power. It humiliated the Prime Minister Theresa May very famously. But of course, there is it's a corruption within a police story. And just tell me this: how hard are these sort of stories when the pictures are more limited? You're talking about an institution which is essentially a building. The matter is quite dry, and you have to make people care. So there's obviously, all TV news journalism is hard, but pieces like this are really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Really tough, Ben, for all of the reasons that you've outlined. It's just that the pictures just aren't there. And as you say, they're just as important. One of the things we wanted to make clear in this piece is that the things that the Police Federation do has an impact on frontline policing. So it really does matter to everyone. You have to think outside the box, basically. You have to try as best as possible not to rely on archive picture. It's very easy to just trawl through the archives. So there's a shot here of a police car and a shot of a police hat. We'll use those things. What I do is just devour I devour documentaries and dramas, and I watch loads of stuff. Actually, the idea for this came from our brilliant producer on this story, Kay Beebe. She was the one that came up with the idea of the police board. I mean, it just worked so well. It was perfect, especially for those like long script lines where you have to explain a lot of stuff. It was perfect. But yeah, I watch a lot of stuff. So very recently, I asked our graphics designer to design a graphic based on the opening to the morning show. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's got those like circles, those blobs that come up, and it was perfect for a graphic. Yeah, just watch loads of stuff, basically. Remember what you've seen, make notes on your phone.
I'm going to just ask a couple of general questions and take general questions, not about this piece, because we don't want to get inside the Police Federation anymore. Let's leave them alone. What do you think is the one characteristic you've got that's helped you to succeed in this business?
Gosh, that's a hard one. Well, whether or not I've got it, I don't know, but it's what I would aspire to have. I think the most important thing in this business really is a couple of things. They're all interconnected. It's empathy, and it's humanity, and it's being able to connect with people. Honestly, I think that is the most important thing. Journalists understandably get a bad rep. People don't trust the journalistic institutions, and there's a reason for that. There's a good reason, I completely understand. And I think if you can stand in front of somebody and you can be yourself, it sounds a bit twee, but if you can be yourself and be real, then that means something. It means a huge deal to the person who's taking a risk, actually, in sharing their story with you. So I think those things.
Well, I think you've got that, and I don't know you that well, but I think you've also got the flip side of it. Those are soft skills. You've also got the hard skills of not worrying too much about upsetting people. In India, you had to, these are tough situations. You have to expect people not to like everything you're going to ask. That's another thing. And you've also got to have, I think, in you a drive to want to tell a story that you think is important. So, anyway.
Absolutely.
I'm going to stop paying you compliments. I don't need to. Do we have any other questions on a more general theme at the front?
With the sensitive stories that you've covered, have you had much backlash from interviewees and/or audiences? And if so, how do you respond to it?
You know what? Touch wood. So far, I've never had an interviewee that's come back and said, "I'm unhappy with this piece." I'm sure it will happen at some point. It does happen, and that's something that we have to deal with. Policing is a very divisive issue. It's very polarised. Anytime I do anything about policing, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, just explodes, and you are on the receiving end of people's rage and very set opinions. I don't think as a society we're very good with intellectual humility. We get stuck in our ways and we don't want to hear what the other person has to say or see anything from another person's perspective. So yes, I've been on the receiving end of that quite a lot.
I'm afraid we've run out of time. That was brilliant. Great to do. And thank you for your questions.